Good morning. Welcome to our Delray office here. I'm going to do a little walk around, then I'm going to go on my headset. Meet all of our new team here in Southeast Florida.
Welcome.
In this beautiful office. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
All right. So
Beautiful.
so that we can be have a little bit better audio quality, I'm going to put my headset on here, and I am a little bit hoarse, losing my voice, but we're going to have a great session today. So Bruce, is Bruce Oliver on? Bruce, did you share a little bit of the update on what's going on?
I can do that now if you'd like.
Please do.
So, yeah, good morning, everyone. So, you know, as everybody knows, well, I don't know as everybody knows, we certainly would hope everybody knows, the Fed did increase rates again, half a point, which actually is a really good sign, because as we've been talking about it, our biggest challenge right now with mortgage rates is that inflation exists, right? So the biggest reason the Fed's going to continue to raise interest rates is to slow inflation. And in reality, by them slowing inflation, the rise that we're seeing in interest rates, contrary to the narrative put out there in the media, actually helps mortgage rates dramatically. So mortgage rates, the Fed did increase rates a half a point, which is the first time they've dropped from their series of 3/4 point increases since February of last year. So what that tells us is two things. It tells us that inflation is starting to get under control. And typically, as we've also talked about, mortgage rates typically run about 1 3/4% over the 10-year treasury. Okay, so 10-year treasury is hovering around 3.5. So mortgage rates should be about 5 1/4. And as you know, they went up almost 400 basis points, not 1.75, 400 basis points when inflation was out of control. So now that inflation is under control, they're coming down. They really still should be about 1% less than they are right now. And we all believe, as you've been hearing me say it for months, that at least I do, and the services that I look at and the systems that I look at, the data, we do think rates are going to continue to drop. So to put that into practical knowledge, I know that I spoke literally about a month ago, about maybe 3 weeks ago, about doing some prospecting calls as to what this means to our potential buyers and the increase in affordability, right? So when we spoke last time, a few weeks ago, we speak every week, but when we went over specific affordability, a $500,000 mortgage back in October, say October 20th, had the same payment as a 580 mortgage had about 3 weeks ago. So in other words, affordability increased about 15%. You could borrow $580,000 right now for the exact same payment that you were able to borrow $500,000 for only back on October 20th. And that trend is continuing. Rates are still coming down. Right now, that $500,000 mortgage payment of $3,600 and change is equivalent to $604,000. So what that means is over the past 3 weeks, we had another 4% increase. What used to be 580 just 3 weeks ago payment is now equal to 604. So you're seeing affordability increase, and what will happen, and we just all this notice from experience, and all of us that have been in the business, and for those that have not been in the business, the important thing is this will hit the media at some point. You're going to see this hit the media once some of the negative economic news starts to hit, and fears of recession hit. You're going to see more people getting out into the market, more buyers getting out into the market, because they're going to start to realize, wow, I can afford more home now. It's incumbent upon us as real estate professionals and mortgage professionals to make sure we make this part of our prospecting now, reach out for folks and let them know literally with the language that, hey, connecting with people. Just want to let everybody know affordability is up significantly. If you were on the sidelines waiting, or if you were unaware of that, I'd love to get you some information to be able to show you. And I could tell you that people are shocked. I made some calls with one of the folks in Westfield last week, and we had reached out to some folks you hadn't talked to in a while, and they were surprised, and they were looking to get off the fence. So it is a worthwhile reason to make some calls, and it also speaks to the narrative of some of the negative news that's out there with concerns about pricing and all this and everything else. If affordability is going up, it really helps us as professionals be able to educate people and look sharper, and I don't mean just look sharper, but be able to provide an example of our professionalism and things that they need to know, because if they wait till they hear from everybody else, there's going to be more competition in the market. There's going to be more buyers out there. So that's pretty much what's going on.
So Bruce, I'm just working through the headset in the group here. So basically you said 500 can now get 604 for the same payment.
since October 21st, and literally about 3 weeks ago, 580 is where we were, and it could get about 604. So you're literally talking about, it's a big number. It's 100 grand. I mean, people that were looking at houses mid-October that went on the sidelines can afford 100 grand more home right now.
Okay,
You know
so
we gotta let people know.
So everybody that's here live, Julio, everybody that's here live, Bruce had just been tracking 3 weeks. The high point for the mortgage rates, somebody who could afford 500 3 weeks ago could afford 580, and today for that same payment can get 604. So we have $104,000 improvement in buying power from around mid-October, Bruce.
Yeah, and nobody knows it. People do not know it because the narrative on the news is rates are higher, and it's not correct.
What our lending partner, and once we get that squared away, we'll have everything on the TV, but nobody's talking about this, right? So you now have your buyers that from literally 2 months and a day ago can now afford 104,000 more with the same exact payment. And earlier, while we were preparing for the call, Bruce mentioned to me that there's an anomaly in the market right now where I know buyers don't want to pay points. And Bruce, I'm going to tell you this, there are some new agents in the business who don't even know what a point really is because it's been such a foreign concept in the past decade. Yeah. But if you're willing to pay a 1 point, you're probably seeing 0.5% better in the rate, Bruce.
Yeah, it's really incredible because and the reason for that is because the mortgage market knows that rates are going to drop, so they don't want to fund the higher coupon rates. So there's more benefit if you pay the point because they don't want to get stuck holding a hot potato. Because if somebody's at 6.25, when rates continue to drop, they're going to refinance away. So what they're doing is they're trying to, if you pay a point, they're willing to offer that better price now.
So normally, you know, from my experience, you'd be paying 1.5 to 1.75. Now you can get that for a point, which probably further increases your buying power.
You could get yourself down into the 5s if you pay a point.
And that would be a really good technique if we're in a market where sellers are challenged to move the property, where you can say, you know, preferential financing, seller will pay a point, or maybe, I know it's dicey, Bruce, maybe you put 5 3/4 fixed rate to qualified buyer, right? And you put that little asterisk.
Another thing, and just to answer your question, people that don't know what a point is, a point by definition is just prepaid interest. So you could use points to do something permanent and temporary. So you can pay a point to get a lower rate, but you can also pay a point and use it for a temporary reduction. So if mortgage rates right now are say 6.25, if a person wants to pay 1 point, they can also have the first year at 5.25, and then the 6.25 rate would go in place from their second through their 30th year. So what you could have is some creativity with that again. But again, the idea is just about increasing affordability, and most people don't realize this, and it's opening up the door for, you know, we have offices in Florida too. I mean, I know specifically in the Florida market, buy down are a little more prevalent than they are up north here, but you know, points can be your friend in a market like this where rates are known to be going down because you can buy ahead of that. So, or you can always refinance too, but it's a good time for, it's a good time for rates right now. You're going to see some bumpiness, but literally I'm looking at the chart, and mortgage rates have not gotten worse since October 18th. It's ridiculous. It's been a skyward up, you know, just right to where it should be, and it should continue to happen. So appreciate you letting me explain that to everybody, and you guys all know how to find us.
So Bruce, there are a couple of comments in the chat where they're asking if you could put together you know, like a summary of what you just talked about, the increased buying power that we could, you know, present to our buyers and sellers.
I can do that. And also, just so you know, I mean, I know you have some, you know, you could get in touch with your Supreme Lending rep, and we could actually do something specific to a buyer that you might have been talking to. So even if you want to get a little more personal, we can do it specific to them and personalize it, co-brand it with you. But I certainly can put out something that will illustrate this. I'll shoot it over to Rob or Fred or whatever, and we'll get it out to the group. No problem at all.
Great, thank you.
All right, so now we're going to go on to today's topic. Now, I'm going to ask you, Robert, do you hear an echo, or are we good?
No, we're good.
You hear an echo? All right, you're probably hearing me. All right, let me try it like this.
Well, now we don't hear you.
Let's see.
I don't have your audio.
Can you hear me now, Dan?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay. All right, we're gonna go. So today's subject is,
Hey, here's just one quick thing. We now have 100 people on the call, which is
Cool.
really wonderful.
well, that's fantastic, and especially considering this is, I think, the third time we've done this topic in the past year. So welcome everybody. Everybody from our new Remax Advantage Plus family, welcome to the group. I'm ecstatic to say I think we have 5 referrals that have gone from Advantage Plus to and from our New Jersey team. So I'm super excited about that. And you know, we got some big applause over here, Robert. And I'd like to find a way to keep that going, keep that top of mind awareness out there. And I want to go into the subject material for today, which is basically overcoming every listing objection and how to secure listings that are worth securing. And I've had some conversations with many different people, and you might have heard parts or all of this, but I think the reinforcement of it's going to be really valuable. And I think studies show that you need to really hear something 7 times for it to really sink in. So the listing concept that I'm going to talk about is changing the listing appointment or the listing sales process from a presentation or a sales pitch to a conversation where there's parity. And what I mean by that is if you have a engagement with somebody that may or is definitely selling their home, and you're out there selling features and benefits of working with Rob Lazar or Remax Select, you're basically pitching, and at the end of the day, you're going to ask for a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And what I am suggesting is when we have this conversational piece, we lead them to a self-discovery of what the best process is. And then the obvious choice is going to be us because we're the one that led them down that path. For example, I've studied, and not just in the real estate industry, but if you look at buying processes, if you go to a car dealership and there's the high-end car that's 130,000, there's the stripped down model at 80. Most people buy the $95,000 model because they don't want to be in the bottom version, but they don't want to break the bank going all the way to the top. If you study restaurant sales, the most expensive bottle of wine rarely sells. The cheapest bottle doesn't sell well, but people purchase somewhere in the middle. The same is true with the decision on how to price a house. And the historical way of doing this is we have evidence, which is our market analysis, and we go there. We are market experts. There's no question about that. We go to these opportunities, we present the evidence, and we say, and I just see you on the camera, Robert. We see, Robert, your house is worth $500,000. Here's the evidence that it's worth that. What do most sellers think their house is worth in spite of evidence before them? Anybody? It doesn't even need to be Robert. Let's not have it be Robert. What does the seller say when you show them that the house is worth $500,000? What do they normally say?
Oh, we want more.
My
So
neighbor sold for more.
What? Zillow says it's worth $650. Like, what do you think if a house is worth $500? A seller's expectation, or they're going to share that with you? Somebody in the room here. What do you think it's normally going to be?
550.
510, 600, 550,
600.
600. I hear 600. So let's say if it was 600, right? Was that Eric?
Yes.
So Eric, if they think it's worth 600 and you have clear evidence that it's worth 500, where do you think most of your peers leave that listing opportunity if they are successful in getting it? What's the price on the agreement?
600 or 610.
600 or 610. I seem to think a lot of agents try to push back a little bit and come in and they say, oh, you know, this crazy guy Eric won at 600, but I got him to go for 559. And you know what? I'm so good, I got them to agree to reduce it to 529 after 2 weeks. Can any of you see that experience here in South Florida?
Yes.
Right now, Eric, can I role play with you for just a minute here on this?
Sure.
So if you were out there and the seller says, I want 600, you give them the evidence is worth 5. You listed at 559 or 550. Is that a win?
Yeah, I would think so. In our market, yes.
And you have a discussion with a seller and say, look, if I expose it, market it correctly, get everybody to see it and it doesn't sell, when are we going to adjust the price? Do you do that at the onset or only after it doesn't move?
Onset.
In a beginning, nowadays, I say unfortunately in the South Florida market, we're not really sure what prices are. We don't know if they're going up, down, sideways. But we can certainly see 600 is not within reason. We can try. I would suggest no higher than 550, and we'll know after 15 to 21 days if that's in the right ballpark or not. If not, we need to reevaluate.
So you're setting the stage, and then the homeowner is expecting to have to reposition the house after 15 days, right?
Yeah, correct.
And then I think most agents would say, all right, after 15 days, we're going to adjust the price down to, 525 or even 500. And what would happen, Eric, if you were then to ask a homeowner, after 15 days, if we adjust the price to 515 or 500, can you tell me what do you expect to see on that first offer that comes in? What do you think they would say?
475. Well,
Yep.
they would expect full price.
I would say that when I've participated in this and I asked the seller, after your house has been on for 2 weeks and we've adjusted the price, tell me what the first offer is going to look like. They almost instinctually, Eric, say, I think it's probably going to be low because they've seen it's been on the market for 2 weeks and they might think that there's something wrong with our house. And if you get the seller to make that acknowledgement, then we can pivot away from, starting at that higher point. And I'm not here to be critical of how we do business. I'm just here to give some additional opportunities and options on how you might look at that same experience. So if we reverse that back, right, instead of coming to a listing conversation or opportunity with a solo price, if we were to go there and give sellers options, because do you think a seller would be in favor of more options or less, Eric?
More options.
So the more options that I want to propose is when I come to your house and you have this fantasy it's worth 600, I have evidence that it's worth 500. I know that human psychology means that we're going to land in the middle most of the time. I don't like those odds. So I want to redefine the parameters before the conversation happens. I would say, look, we're going to talk about if we decide to work together, how are we going to position and introduce your home to the market? There are 3 ways. The first way is very similar to what an appraiser would do. It has limited emotion or maybe even no emotion. It looks at location, comp sales, square footage, all the parameters that an appraiser would do when he evaluates your home and comes up with a number. Okay, price per square foot, all those parameters. This is the market value approach. The second approach that you can utilize when you go to sell your house is you can try to use the lottery approach, which has been very traditional in real estate, where sellers ask a little bit more than they expect to get in anticipation of having some room to negotiate. Are you familiar with that, Eric?
Yes.
right? So you want 550, you ask 575. Very common, it's happened for 100 years. The third way that my more savvy clients are opting for, Eric, is to price it auction style, where we intentionally price it 3 to 8% below the market. When we do this, we find that we get, 5 to 15 times the amount of offers. And if you're able to get 5 to 15 times the amount of qualified offers on your home, what do you think that would do to the ultimate sales price, Eric?
Raise it.
Raise it.
Raise it. So, we go through the traditional analysis of how we get to where the value is. And then once we complete that, we do like a test close and say, hey, if we decided to work together, how would you like to position your home on the market, Eric?
Well, in my market, we get a lot of second homeowners, a lot of wealthy people, that if they can't get their lottery price, they don't want to sell it.
Right. But I mean, if you break it down, like their lottery price, if they're going high and then they're expecting to adjust it moderately, right? I would suggest that we have evidence and we have case studies of when we take that same home that was at 500, we listed at 490 and it sells for 652.
Right.
And I don't know, is Audrey Potter Plummer on the phone on the meeting? I guess she's not, but we had one in West Orange, New Jersey. It was expired at 650. We put it on the market at 575. We sold it for 654. That's an excellent case study. That's probably 6 months old. I actually have the recording of how we came up with the price on our hub, and it's on YouTube. But these are stories that I think if you're in a particular market, Eric, when I talked earlier, you said you do a lot in Palm Beach Gardens. If you have 2 or 3 examples of how this occurs in Palm Beach Gardens, you can say, hey, here's 2 or 3 homes that I sold, and also give an example of a similar home that you get to pick. I mean, you can cherry pick it. You don't need to pick all the homes. You can say, here's an example of a property where they overreached. Here's where the original asking price, here's where they reduced it to, and here's the ultimate sales price. Compare that to one that priced it slightly below the market and perhaps even got more than the asking price of the second home. I know that's a lot of conjecture, but did you follow that, Eric?
Yes, I did.
And if you give real examples within the past 6 months, I think that gives you true credibility.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
And the key mistake that I see a lot of people in the business do is we know that if you overprice it or you price it aggressively or you price it lottery style and then you adjust the price, that you're going to get a lower bid more times than not, even after lowering the price. So what we do is we say, Robert Garber, if we do this and we lower the price, in all likelihood, we're going to get a lower offer. When we say it, it does not have the same meaning as if you ask them that question and they tell that back to you.
Right.
Okay. So the concept of, if we were to price it, because you have your number that you need to get, this is a second home, you're not going to sell it unless you get this price. You still want to get the maximum value for your house. If you knew that you would be giving a buyer an opportunity by letting your house linger without getting offers, do you still want to do that? And what would that first offer look like? And then you back it up with case studies. I think it's incredibly effective. And in some of the meet and greets, I talked about some people doing prospecting and some of the programs that we do. And I know that when we make outbound calls, whether it's to our past customers or whether it's to old leads that we had in our database or people who just didn't respond, I know sometimes people are calling and secretly like, I hope they don't pick up because I don't want to have this awkward conversation. And I think that what we need to do is we need to embrace, somebody say something? We need to embrace the challenges that people have and be prepared for every possible listing objection that could ever happen. and not be, oh shucks, they asked me this difficult question. And sometimes it might be, you know, how many houses have you sold in, you know, Boynton Beach in the last 6 months, right? And if you sold none, you might feel that you're intimidated. You might feel like, oh, there's the disqualifying question. But if you're prepared to answer every single objection and you know exactly how you're going to do it, this doesn't matter. Okay, this is just an opportunity for you to shine. And when people do ask, go ahead, Ron.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but what I tell my agents all the time is every listing appointment you go on is going to be different. They're never the same. It's either the seller stubborn enough to want his price, or they're willing to listen to you. And it's how strong you are in your presentation. If you're strong in your presentation and it makes sense to them,
Conversation.
I use the lottery and the market value and the auction a lot. And since you've mentioned that before in previous classes, but and that does work, and that is a great system. But there's still stubborn sellers that want their number, and if I can't convince them, I would, if they're adamant about it, I'll take the listing. But I'm good at getting price reductions, so I tell my agents to work the listing the best you can to get the best prices you possibly can, just to get the listing. Because once you got a 6-month listing, you're the boss, you're the king of the hill. You can go ahead and make those changes of changing the price as you go down the road. And again, like you said, Rob, it's after 2 weeks, 3 weeks on the market, you see those days on the market, you have to explain to them, listen, you know, when you put your house on the market for the first time, it smells like it's like a fresh loaf of bread. It smells good, it looks good. The longer it stays on the market, it becomes stale. And agents see that. So they're going to try to avoid showing your listing or use your listing as a stepping stone. So I use those kind of terms when I'm at my listing presentation. Also, when I explain to my agents also.
Oh, fantastic. I think for those of us who've been in the business a while, I think if we can reframe it, and I know you said presentation, Ron, but I think if we're looking at how the whole process plays out, it really needs to be a conversation and discussion. And the impact of properties being stale is really significant. And I have a story from an agent up in our Westfield office that he used to repeat in the conference room, and it had significance. And he would talk about when he was in New York City and he ran a nightclub and a business. And he said, if we were going to open up a Broadway play, right, and we do all the preparation, which is like akin to staging the house, when that house hits the market, it goes on Zillow, Realtor, everybody's CRM, everybody gets notified of this listing. And if it's not priced right, if it's not prepared and staged right, people are going to have a bad impression and they're going to say, I'm not interested in this property. Now, when you lower the price again, it's not going to have that same impact. It's going to be now stale. He compared that to, we do all this work, we put on a Broadway production, the New York Times comes out and they write a review. If the first night is bad, we can't come back to the New York Times a week later and say, hey, can you unsee what you saw and write a new review for this production that we did? And this is so relevant to putting a house on the market, because once somebody gets an opinion of whether this is a good value, whether this is appropriate for them or not, they can't unsee or create a fresh new opinion. It just doesn't happen. So there's a lot of evidence as to why, you know, houses sell for more when they contract early, and we need to be able to communicate that to our potential sellers clearly, in my opinion. And Eric, I have empathy for, you know, the sellers that are like, I don't need to sell this house. You know, it's a luxury. It's not a necessity for me to sell it.
Right.
But I will share with you, I don't know, is Amy Roan quit on the call? We got a lot of people must be out doing business. But we have an agent who stuck to her guns at a listing in Brielle for 2.1 million in Monmouth County, and she had this CEO of a company come down in their very nice car, very self-important, I'll use that term, and met with Amy at the house. They walked through the house, and Amy was certain that this house wasn't going to be worth more than 2.1, 2.2, and the seller surprisingly wanted to list it for 2.9. Amy told me that she had the conversation with him after the listing appointment. She's like, Rob, I don't know if I did the right thing or not. But he seemed rather disappointed, and he sped off in his car, said, thank you for your time, but I felt really good about it. And is Maria Delafera on? Nobody's on. So,
I think Maria's sick.
okay. So, this was on a Saturday. On a Wednesday, this gentleman called up Amy and said, I want to list it at your
I'm
price.
on, Rob. I'm sorry. I had a problem with my microphone.
Okay. So you remember Amy's story, right? Where she originally lost it and felt good about it. And then was it 4 days later?
Oh, absolutely. She was actually stunned that he even called her back.
Yeah. She was like amazed that he called her back, but he's like, look, I rethought about it, and can you just send me the paperwork to sign electronically? And took the listing for 2.1 and had a buyer for 2.2. Ultimately, the guy decided not to sell, unfortunately, but the story is that she did get the listing. She got activity, and you know, she still may wind up selling it, but she held to her guns. And you know, I think sometimes we need to exercise that restraint rather than, you know, take listings that are gonna, you know, be a burden.
He actually contacted her this summer and said he's not going to sell this summer, but definitely summer of 2023.
Right. But you know, Eric and everybody else on the call, like sometimes you have to, you know, stick to your convictions about how you're gonna, you know, sell properties. And you know, if you price it right and you are constantly having prints of sales that are over ask price, when you go there, you can have a conversation and say, you know, I'm getting 4% more than the industry. Working with me is almost free. You know, you're paying me 5 or 6%, and I'm getting you 4% more than every other agent. And if they charge you 3, you know, I'm still the best bargain in town.
Rob,
Yeah.
I like the conversation aspect of the listing appointment. I like the way that you talk about making them answer the questions, making them the person that thought of it when actually we did.
So
Like the example of somebody who one of them you did that was really good. They wanted to overprice their house, and the house down the street sold for let's say 100,000 more, but had all the improvements in it.
oh yeah, that was a really good one, because I kind of played dumb on that one, and I said, are you familiar with the house, you know, 4 doors down? Tell me about it. It's like, oh, it's just like ours, except for they blew the kitchen out, they put all new windows, and they finished the basement. How much do you think that cost? It had to be like 150,000, and yet you want to ask 25,000 less than that. So like sometimes if you leverage the fact that people know, and people tend to have more knowledge now than they did 10 or 20 years ago about what's happening in their neighborhood. Let me mute everybody. And I think that was more effective than me telling them that they blew out the kitchen, they put a, you know, breakfast seating area in a 4 Seasons room, all of these activities, as opposed to having them identify and tell you what that value is. I want to ask, what are some of the listing objections that you have? And I'm going to address them live without hesitation, I hope. So everybody's muted. If you want to unmute yourself. How about anybody here? No?
It depends on what listing you're going. If you go to a for sale by owner, they're pretty much confident that they can sell it themselves without us. So I try to convince them, you know, what to expect having strangers walk through their house that don't qualify for the property. Or if I'm going on a general listing appointment, they're going to ask you questions like, you know, do you know the area with the school system? They're going to ask you a lot of questions. And I always say to them in the very beginning, you know, tell me what your questions are, and I'll try to address them as we go along. First thing they say to you is how much is your commission? And I don't usually go and tell them that right from the very, very beginning. I said, well, we'll get to that. What all the questions do you have? And then I write everything down, and then I go ahead and present my presentation, what I do for them. That usually gets them into that mode. And like I was telling my agents, you can always watch body language when you go to a listing appointment. If they're sitting back in their chair with their hands like this, or with their arms crossed, you don't have their attention. But when they have their elbows on the table like this, they're listening to every word you have to say. So, and they're going to shoot objections at you, and you have to be prepared. You have to know what to say and how to come back with them. You know, so we just did a listing presentation classes a couple of weeks ago. So a lot of the agents understood, you know, how to overcome them. But you have to have a list of it. You have to have a script in front of you, not so much a script, but I usually have a bunch of information that you can come back with in front of you so that you have something to look at.
So Ron, here's a good conversation for sale by owner. And if they are moving from that house to another property, what percentage of the people that are for sale by owner do you think are using a real estate agent to buy their next house?
Probably most of them are.
How about in the room? You think most agents that are FSBOing are going to buy their house with an agent? And why do they buy with an agent?
It's easier.
Because they don't pay the commission, right? So I would say when they're selling the house on their own, say, hey, by the way, when you sell this, where are you off to? And wherever their answer is, and by the way, are you working with an agent? And almost always the answer is going to be yes. And then I just go like this, that's really interesting. And I just pause for a minute. And then be like, why? And I'm like, you know, in my experience, I've found, Ron, that most homeowners that try to sell by themselves are doing it to save the commission. Is that one of the reasons why you're doing it? And they always say, yes, obvious question. And the follow-up question to that is, if you're working with an agent to buy, what type of a buyer do you think avoids working with a real estate agent? And you ask this to the homeowner. And if I ask somebody in the room, what type of buyer is looking to find a FSBO on their own and avoid working with an agent? Why are they doing that? Why would a buyer avoid working with an agent that can give them a lot of value, a lot of advice, a lot of service?
Rob, we lost the volume on you.
Because of what?
You just
We
lost the
lost your
volume.
volume screen.
You're back now.
Okay. So why would they avoid that? Well, the obvious answer is the buyer is looking. The buyer is looking to save the commission, right?
Mhm.
And if the buyer is looking to save the commission, and Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, you're looking to save the commission, let me ask you a dumb question. Who saves the commission? Right? And when you ask that question, you get a lot of people like, oh, I never thought about it like that. And, you know, it's further my experience that people who look to buy properties directly from the homeowner, they realize that it doesn't get full exposure. And if a property doesn't get full exposure, what do you think that does to the sales price? It puts the sales price down. Now, if you ask those questions to a for sale by owner, it at least moves the conversation in a different direction. Would you not agree? And I think most of us on this call, is there anybody on the call that thinks most for sale by owners are looking to buy a for sale by owner, or they're looking at the total market?
Total market.
It's unanimous. Everybody's looking at the total market. So these are ways that we can engage them without having to completely compete on price. And I look forward to having these objections because I know how I'm going to answer them every single time. And Colleen, you mentioned having what I call seller participation. Go ahead. I'll defer that. Yes. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if can you hear me?
I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to repeat it after she says it. Go ahead.
I have a question for you. I'm going to be taking a listing shortly.
If you can hold on for just 1 second, we have a live question here, then I'll come back to you. Sorry about that, Lynn. Go ahead. So you're on a listing appointment. It doesn't sell. It goes on with somebody else.
Well, no, give me a second. The past client of mine, I'm going in there and I can tell by looking at the comps that it needs to come significantly down. Okay, probably about $50,000, $50,000 to $75,000 in order for it to sell. Listed with the previous agent, but it was a family member. She's a real estate agent. So I'm looking. I've been successful recently with telling people about market conditions, that the prices back in March and April are not the prices that we're getting now due to the interest rates and the peak of the market. But I know that I'm going to have a big challenge trying to get them to price it appropriately. And I want to be able to, go in there and knock them dead with my marketing, but I wanted to have it the correct price so I can get it sold. Any suggestions?
So the first suggestion that I have is we have to have the abundance mindset so that we can't compromise the way that we engage with people. And, the reason I brought up the story about Amy, and there's many, many other stories like that, is I think we need to be intellectually honest with our sellers, and we need to find a way to get them to realize, here's the evidence, right, of how we determine the value of your house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we decided to work together, Lynn, how would you want to put your home on the market? And then talk about how properties behave with different strategies. Okay, and I know it's not a simple one-line answer to your question, but that happens all the time, right? People get told by our peers that their home is worth more than it is because they're basically buying the listing, and then they're going to try to lock it up for 6 months, hopefully chop the price down or maybe get lucky with the buyer. And I just think that that's, not the most sustainable way to have satisfied clients long-term, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. These are past clients. So, but again, it's going to be a bit of a shock for them when it comes in with the price.
I think, learning from Rob, I think honesty is the best policy.
Mm-hmm.
And when you tell them that you realize the price they're looking for, this is what's going on in the market, that your integrity and the feelings you have for them as a client wouldn't allow you to overprice it so that they're disappointed in the performance and, have a negative feeling about you. I would rather, what you say is, I would rather walk away and have you say, I'm a good person and, I have integrity and I was looking out for your best interest than to overprice it and have you say, she didn't direct me properly. I'm not getting any activity. It's the same as it was before. And, she just sold me a bill of goods.
Okay.
It's important to me that we work together as a team.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to have my trust, and to have my trust, I have to be honest with you.
Okay.
I'd rather not have the listing than disappoint you. The takeaway is very good.
So the thing
I
is
learned that from Rob.
once you tell them exactly what the market looks like, that you're being honest with them. You're giving them all the numbers of what's sold and what's available. So you're already telling them, this is the price where I think you should be at. And they're
Mhm.
saying, well, I want to be at 600 when you know 5.25 is really the top sale in the neighborhood. You can say, well, we can take it for 600, but like I said, it's 525. So I would take the listing, and then when it's time to come to make a price change, you can say, this is what I told you. Remember what I told you, it was 525. So now you need to be closer to that 525, maybe list it at 549 to try to get that number.
So-
Again, I never walk away from the listing. So
Yeah.
I would take the listing, but
Mhm.
that's my suggestion. It's like Colin said, you show integrity. Yeah.
So Ron, you're old school. I love you, but you're
It
old
works
school.
though. It works though,
Well,
Rob.
no. But there are more ways. There are different ways to handle it, right? And I think the way that we expand our range is by having exposure to different ways of addressing issues. Now, I heard you say like this is the price I recommend or something to that effect. I avoid saying this is what I recommend. I just provide options, and I say, look, assuming we decide to work together, there are three ways that you can put your house on the market. You know, you can put it on based on what an appraiser would likely come in at. We call that the market value approach. You can price it so that you have room to negotiate down, or you can price it so you have room to negotiate up, where you get an abundance of buyers. Now, sellers have a misconception that the ask price, the higher the ask price, the better the sale price is going to be. But I think that there's an inverse relationship when you overprice it, and sellers don't understand that. Would you, in the room here, would you all agree, if you raise your hand, that sellers think that they ask more, they get more in most cases, right? But do we know that that's not the reality? So like everybody's raising their hand, and our job is to educate them on that information. So you said, Ron, I recommend this. I would educate, say, here's the three options that you have, and here's how the properties behave under these three circumstances. How would you like to expose your home to the market? And if you bring examples of properties that went for, $50,000 and $100,000 above asking price, and say, look, here's an example of a homeowner that realized, or a seller that realized the value of maximizing the exposure and pricing it correctly, they got 55,000, they got 110,000 over ask. Now, here's another example of somebody who wanted to try to win the lottery, and they didn't have any activity early on. The only way that they could get activity is by cutting, and they can negotiate from weakness. So, hey, assuming, and this is something I would even write down for everybody, assuming we decide to work together, which gives parity, right? That's the ultimate rapport conversation. Assuming we decide, not assuming you choose me, because I could choose not to work with you, right? If you wanted to list it, if you had a $600,000 house, who would list it for, and I'm just going to go by in the room here. If there's a $600,000 house and you did everything, and they said, you make a lot of sense, but I'll only give you the listing if you do it for $650 at 600. Who would take the listing? Raise your hand. Be honest. I think I would if they said that's right. Now, what if they said 900? Would you take the listing? Okay, we all have our boundaries, right? And I think that if we can educate them and let them know that, you can make the decision, but I might choose not to work with you. If you're so out of range that you say 900, I would be embarrassed to put it into the MLS. So I want to say, like, this is not an audition. I look at the real estate industry as, we go out there and we go on stage and we do our presentation, we tap dance, we tell them what they want to hear. And then we ask, did I get the job? Am I hired? In my world, at the end, I say, hey, assuming we decide to work together, how would you like to position your house? Very different conversation. Now, I apologize. Your first name, Leticia. Leticia has a question for us here. And what was your question? I'm going to repeat it after you say it.
Did we lose you, Rob, or is
No,
it
no,
just?
no, no.
a question?
I'm going to repeat. So basically, Leticia said she had a listing that she lost. It's been on the market for 50 days. The price has been cut below what she thought it would sell for. And the question is, should you actually take that listing? Is basically the question. I would be honest. Might give it a little, week or two, where the holidays coming on, put it on in January at the right price, right? And you need to have some conviction that it can sell. I mean, if they're at your price, I think the property just became stale. Has anybody ever seen a property that's been listed for so long, you drive by, you don't even realize it's on the market anymore because the sign's been there forever? That's the scenario that happened. That's the scenario that happens in real estate. So I would take that listing, but I would give it a little bit of a break. And even if it wasn't like in a holiday period, I'd probably take it off the market for a week or two. I would make sure that it's presented properly, and I would try to build up a little bit of hype before it goes on the market. I know in New Jersey, we could put on like a coming soon.
Same here.
So it sounds like, I want to summarize what was going on there. It's like, they had in their mind that they wanted to do something that was destructive. And if you can't find a way to communicate yourself around that, sometimes you have to say, hey, I wish you all the best. If it doesn't work out, give me a call back. And then when you come back to the relationship, I think that you can have a stronger command on how you do it, especially if the price is below what you felt you could sell it for. But this is like like every listing, almost like every listing, people have different expectations. And one thing I didn't talk about beforehand is, and this is probably a really critical point, is if I were to go in a listing conversation or opportunity with any one of you, the first thing that I would focus on doing is building rapport and trust. Okay. And the easiest way to do that is by, having a conversation as you walk through the property. Okay. And this is my way of building rapport. Can you tell, hey, when you move, where you're going to? Tell me, when did you buy this? What did you like about it when you bought it? And little things, I pick up on fine details. Like if you go into the basement, right? You might say, do you mind if I take, there's no basements here, but if you take a picture of the utility room of like what kind of service you have, how old is your air conditioner? How old are your utilities? You said, do you mind if I take some photos? And another way of building great rapport is when you start out, you go there and you say, do you mind if I take a few notes while we walk through? Like, what seller is not going to appreciate that you're detail oriented to take notes? But is that not just respectful to do? Otherwise, you're taking notes. Like, what are you writing down there about me? You don't like the color of my bedroom? But if you can build rapport, and then people will literally, when you give them the three options, it's not an option of going with somebody else. It's an option of which of the three options that you're providing with me am I going to choose to go with? If that makes any sense. And I don't like, and no, Ron, no offense to you, I love you and you're super successful. And you've been doing this for a really long time. And that's what the industry has done. This is what my recommendation is. And then if they don't take my recommendation, it gets really weird, right? Because it's like, you're not listening to my recommendation. I told you it wouldn't sell there. It's like a weird conversation. If you tell them these are how the properties behave, you choose how you want to do it, and then we'll decide if we work together, is a really, in my opinion, is a powerful way of not getting rejected, right? And when Amy had that listing in Brielle and she called me afterwards, she wasn't disappointed that she lost it. She's like, Rob, I didn't get it, but I feel really good about it because like I didn't tell him what I had to tell him to get the listing. I told him what I had to do to be honest and to be a fiduciary and to be a good agent. And it's just strange how the universe put that back in her lap. And I think that that's the stuff that we need to do. And Ron, everybody does business differently. And you're super successful. You have some really strong habits that you do to be successful. I just want to give everybody different options when they look at how are we going to talk with difficult sellers. Because sellers are challenging in West Orange, New Jersey. They're a challenge in New York. They're a challenge in Florida.
They're a challenge everywhere, right? You just need to know how to manage those expectations and how to build rapport. Now, if you had a seller that had complete trust in you, right, and was going to listen to what you believe to be the best strategy, like, hey, if we price it a little bit below the market, we're likely to get more activity and it's going to sell at its maximum price. Do you think our business would be a little bit easier? Do you think sellers would have less anxiety? Right? I totally believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be having these conversations with you, because it all starts with rapport and trust, and then it starts with giving them choices. And, you know, we give them 3 choices. Those 3 choices don't include Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, or Compass. Those include the 3 of us that are in their house having that conversation. Right?
Right.
So, you know, it's not trickery. It's not, you know, hey, let's cut the price to the lowest we can to possibly sell it. Let's do what's right for you as a seller, and you decide how you want to handle it. And if you can have stories and case studies that are relevant and recent, I can't imagine sellers rejecting that. Okay. But what they do reject is when we tell them, if you list it too high, you're not going to, you know, you're going to have to cut the price, and then the buyers are going to negotiate down. You know, I might even take a subtle swat at them and say, hey, you know, when we go to find you your house, one of the strategies I do is I look at houses that have been on the market for an extended period of time, and I look at how much leverage we have to negotiate for that. Right. And then you come back and say, I hope you're not that case when we put your house on the market.
So-
I also am a spreadsheet nerd. I'm going to show you. Let me see if I can find this here first.
Rob, while you're finding that, I just wanted to mention also is that we can overcome a lot of the objections by being confident when we are having the conversation. I'm not talking about being arrogant. I'm talking about being confident.
Fair.
People respond. They're looking for someone who is confident in their knowledge and their ability. And that's who they want to work with. So if that's part of the rapport that we're building with them, we can easily overcome a lot of the objections that we're talking about here.
I agree with that. And on top of that, if you allow the seller to kind of bully you into the price that they want, they're going to start looking at you like, what are you going to do when another agent is trying to negotiate against you as well?
I think the other thing that happens when you let the seller take the reins is that it's never ending. They're always going to be pushing your buttons. They're always going to be telling you how to do and what to do. And they're going to be disappointed even though it was their idea. But I think it's important to have conversations. And I think people really respect honesty. It's the way that you put it across to them. If you're not correcting them and telling them what to do, but letting them tell you and answer the questions, I think it's far more helpful.
So here's an example of a listing that this gentleman, Mark Feingold, had called Maria and myself and said, I have this listing opportunity in a market that I really want to get into. Can you help me? I did an analysis. This took me less than an hour. We did it together with Mark. I have it recorded online how you can do it on our hub. But the evidence in this market shows that if you sell your house under 15 days, you're getting 8.01% more on $1 million house than if it takes more than 30 days to sell it. So if you go to a homeowner and say, this is how the market behaves, if your house goes under contract in 2 weeks, this is the benefit you have. If it stays on for an extended period of time, you know, we might have to adjust the price and get something less. You know, how quickly do you want to get a contract? And if you don't say in under 15 days, there's something wrong with the communication and the value. And this is an actual analysis. And if you look, there's tabs on the bottom. I show exactly how I came up with it. And here's an example of a listing I did with Amy in Rumson, the same woman who had the one in Brielle. By letting houses in the $2+ million market stay on for 4 months versus selling it under 45 days, it was a 16% difference. And at that $2 million price point, it was a $244,000 loss. And I will tell you on this one here, you can even look it up on Zillow. We got him to price it, I think, at 2.2, and we got him 2.45 on it. And the only reason we got him 2.45 is we had competition. Competition is 2 offers. The first offer was 2.2. The second offer was 2.5. The first offer came to 2.45, cash, no inspections. That's how a transaction is supposed to work, folks. But if we had the one offer, that was $250,000 less. So these are stories that sellers don't understand that we need to communicate with integrity. Go ahead. We have a question?
Yes, Rob. It's Bill Tyson.
Good.
Go ahead.
It's Bill Tyson.
Hey, Bill.
You know, the story that always stuck with me was the one that was about how do you want to get the activity on your house? Do you want to price it high enough so that all the agents, well, let's get back to the market. Everybody's looking at the market right now. They've got it on automatic. Send me emails whenever a new listing comes on. And there might be 20 people out there that are in the market right now for buying your type of a house, your price range of a house. When they all get the message and look at your house and then come by and see it in person, their first impression, if it's overpriced, that sticks with them forever. You said this quite well. If they come by and they say it's priced market wise, that's good. Most of them will start to think about making an offer. If it's priced under the market, all of them will make an offer. Which would you rather have?
I mean, thank you for sharing that. And I think, you know, we need to, as an industry, decide how we're going to answer these questions and how we're going to conduct our business. And I think more times than not, it's not a decision of, do I take that $500,000 house at 600 or 570? But how do I educate the homeowner to make the right decision for them and ourselves? Because we, as an industry, get a bad rap for having commission breath and getting overpaid for just putting houses on the market and doing nothing, which couldn't be further from true. We do a lot of, we provide a lot of services to our buyers and sellers, and we need to identify what those are, and we need to be honest with them so that they can maximize what they get. And when they do that, guess what? You have a raving fan. And I spoke about this, I think, yesterday at our meet and greets, but if you're to look at 2 years, 5 years down the road, does somebody remember what commission they paid us? Do you think? Or do you think they just, no, do you think they remember what they paid us, or do you think they remember the experience? Do you think they remember if you didn't return phone calls or you did? Do you think they remember if the closing was organized and professional, or if it was random and haphazard? What do you think they remember? They don't remember if they paid 4, 5, or 6. They remember how the experience was. They remember that all my calls were returned, there was clear communication, the closing went off smooth, or it didn't. You know, they wouldn't, yeah, I think if they were to be honest with themselves and say, hey, if I can get that at 4%, it's a complete nightmare, I'm losing my mind, I don't know if I'm closing, I'm living in a hotel, or I could pay 6%, have it marketed better and have a better experience, they would opt for paying the right price if we can communicate that. So please remember that. 2 things I want to close off with, and then if you want to stay on, I'll stay on for a little bit more. But one of the things is, if we decide to work together, is really powerful, that phrase, because it's not about auditioning for the job. You know, it's not like I'm going for a job interview. Do I get the job? It's about, if you like what we discussed, if we decide to work together, how would you like to position your home on the market, is really powerful. Okay. And if they say, you know, it's great, but I need to think about it. Well, you know, what did I not cover? And over time, you're going to learn how to avoid those experiences where people are like, I need to defer or punt from making a decision. For example, whenever I would go out on a listing opportunity or conversation, I would say, you know, out of respect to you, Letitia, can you have anybody else that you're going to be relying upon available? Because I'd like to give them the ability to ask me a question. And I found that if there's a cousin in, Georgia, or if there's a parent in New York State that has a real estate license and they're participating in this conversation, they're telling the homeowner, oh, that makes a lot of sense. You got to go with that girl, Letitia, right? Because they're not going to say, hey, I need to go talk to my mother-in-law who's a part-time realtor in Oswego, Canada. You know, like this craziness that people use to defer making a decision, right? And that was the first thing that I think we really wanted to do. And I had a second point I wanted to leave you with. We talked about, yeah, so about pricing. So I've been there and I've seen agents when they start to take the lead and have these conversations, sometimes people, you know, have a bias against pricing their house lower than what they expect to get, right? And sometimes sharing examples of that is really relevant instead of telling them. Because let's just take ourselves out of the real estate realm, right? Let's just say that this piece of art was worth $2.5 million, right? And we take it to Christie's auction house. Do you think they start the bid at 3 million, or do you think they start at 500,000? They start at 500,000, right? And there's something that they call a reserve, right? Where they might say, if it doesn't hit this number, we're not going to take it. So we can say to a homeowner, look, you can have your reserve number, but the only way to know what your true value is to get maximum exposure and get people bidding against each other. Because if there is only one bidder, let's be honest, is that a market or not? It's not a market when there's one bidder, okay? And this is powerful because sellers like to have control. Would you all agree? So if you were to say, how important is it for you to have some control over the process? Well, if you don't have multiple bidders, you're surrendering control over to the buyer. They're determining the price. We have our ask, but they're ultimately determining the price. If we have multiple bidders, they're going to bid it up to its true value or maybe even above its true value. Does that make sense? So I hope I gave you some different strategies to communicate that are non-traditional. No offense to all the traditional training, but I think it's good to have exposure. And I really believe that we need to have parity when we go out there and say, hey, you know, not every seller is right for me. I'm not right for every seller. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if my solution fits the way that you see your house being marketed and sold for top dollar. That makes sense? All right. Well, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to invite our new RE/MAX Advantage Plus group into our family. And I'm going to stay here and meet and greet everybody here on the Zoom meeting. Thank you, everybody.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
I should have done this call 3 weeks ago. I have my doctor has a property in Direction or Coastal that it's probably worth $4 to $4.5 million. He wanted $6.5 million, and out of desperation, I don't know out of what, I agreed to do it. And now it's been 2 weeks in no activity. So I got to talk to him to get the price down. Any recommendations? I should have had I'd rather respect you than let you down later, but I didn't.
So you had no showings or limited?
No showings. Well, basically it's a tear down, but his wife believes that the value is worth $7 million. And not to offend them, I took the listing at 6.5.
So would you be opposed to temporarily taking it off the market, having a conversation with them about, you know, a different approach? And if you were to use the strategy of, if it's worth, you think it's $4.5 million?
Probably correct. 4.5,
so,
maybe 5.
So if you were to say, look, let's put this back on the market after a temporary pause for, you know, 4 million, 4.5 million. And we're going to use a strategy that the wealthy do when they sell art, and we put it on and we have a reserve price, right? And if you put it on at, let's say you put it on at 4.5 or even 4 million, right? You don't have any offers. Maybe you raise the price. People think you had a lot of activity.
Okay.
So that's just a suggestion. a niche market that you have there. And, you know, it might also take a little bit longer of a marketing time as well for that.
If I can tell you, in the last 12 months, I've been in this business 40 years. I've helped nearly 4,000 people buy or sell a house. I have never been wrong so much in the last, as I have been in the last 12 months. It's cost me a small fortune. So I got to say that I've kind of been beat down like the, you know, the elephant that's got the rope tied around his leg. I've lost so much that I'm like, okay, whatever you want. The South Florida market has been like no other market. I mean, you list something that's never going to sell and it sells 5–10% higher than that.
Right. So, you know, the concept, Eric, of just saying that we don't need to sell it at the price we put it on at, you know, and comparing that to the way other assets trade, like art, would be a relevant comparison. And, you know, not everybody's going to relate to that, but I think, you know, out of 3, you're probably going to get at least one of them that, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Let's try it.
Right. All right.
All right. But I appreciate your input.
You know, there was a conversation that I've used. Obviously, I've never had something, you know, in that price range that you're specifically talking about right now. But I always point out to a seller where when we really have to make a big change, that you can't underprice a house, because wherever you put it on, if it's at such a price that it's going to attract so many buyers, they're going to bid it up to where it should be. We're just looking for the starting point that's going to get the most amount of people in to see the property.
I mean, our market's so crazy that an agent listed a house at $10 million, which was insane. And it sold in 10 days at $4.5 million, and they sold it at $4.5 million. So that's kind of what the challenge I'm having.
Hey, Rob. Rob,
Yeah.
I just wanted to one last thing. I just want to say welcome to the Florida team. I can't wait to see you guys down there. And I did also just want to remind you that we are accepting referrals up to New York. And anyone in the company who does not know, we have a New York operation too. If you want to refer anything over to us, you know, you can get in touch with me as you need to. And I wish everyone a very, very happy holiday. If I don't connect with everyone again, and it's been a pleasure this year, you know, so thank you to Rob and everyone, you know, for doing these things and putting them on and keeping them consistent. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy holiday, man.
And Eric, just to wrap up your point, like sometimes it seems like you get to this point where you might even have a second guessing of your confidence because a bad decision proves to be right? You're like, that was maybe not the best decision, but they actually got what they got what I felt they wouldn't get.
Yes.
But if you reframe that experience and say, if you priced it even a little bit less, you know, I think you still would have got that same number. And that reinforces that you can't, you know, somebody mentioned you can't underprice a house. And I really believe that. So like there are examples of houses going for $500, $1 million over asking price in the $4 or $5 million range. And there's probably a lot more examples of $4 to $7 million houses going for $1 million less. So there's no rhyme or reason that, you know, something that you didn't expect happen is going to question the way you do your business. So please
also, if I could just add to that, also the fact that you were entrusted with that size of a listing, you know, there's just a whole different level of, obviously they value your opinion or they would have entrusted you with that. So don't change that narrative. This is just the new, what you found.
Hit the nail on the head to any Austin Powers fans. Austin Power, the movie.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I've lost my mojo, baby. I've lost.
Let's get your mojo back.
Oh yeah, you will there, Rick. Yeah, Robert, if you can put together now that you got all these companies here, if we can have a roster of all the offices and people that work there, that would be great. That would be great. Especially now that you got Eric, he's a big catch there in Palm Beach. It's an honor to have him in our company there. And also I see my Mrs. Bisson there, she's there too. So that's great to have everybody together again.
Well,
Tony, so nice to be with you.
Guys,
thanks everybody. Well, we'll put that together, and in the interim, just talk to your office admin or your manager. We can get you that information, and we'll get that disseminated out.
And the other thing,
thanks
Robert,
everybody.
Yeah, the other thing, Robert, do you have any PowerPoint? I asked this before. If you can email me the PowerPoint data you have about the pricing strategy, and then that the Excel spreadsheet that you put together about 45 days and more than 45 days. If we can have that, that'd be great.
So what I'll do is I'll email it to everybody. You can just delete it if you don't want it, but I'll email it to everybody. A couple of the videos I've done, one which was a more formal overcoming all listing objections. I'll put this recording. I have a recording of how I prepared that analysis of how properties behave. I'll send all that out in an email, and if you don't want it, delete it. If you want it, you can take a look at it.
If we can have that spreadsheet there, so that way I can show it to my guy there, so he can put it together for me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Probably we'll go out tomorrow just to set the right expectation because I need to edit this and get it out. Thank you, everybody.